Hello, this is a special bonus edition of Wine Blast to mark the end of season 4 and to say thanks for listening.
Now, it may be the last episode of the season, but for us, this is a first, a world exclusive, a bold step into the unknown for Wine Blast, because this was the first time we'd recorded the pod in front of a live audience. And it was great fun, wasn't it?
It was. And it wasn't just because of the free-flowing wine either. Any excuses, No, it was the kind of thing we're kind of really quite used to doing as part of our normal day jobs, aren't we? Being on stage, talking the hind legs off a donkey about wine in front of lots of nice people. But it was the first time we've done a live format for the podcast. And I hesitate to say it, but I think we could get used to it, couldn't we?
I think we could.
It was good.
World tour, here we come. So if you happen to live in a part of the world that's sunny and warm, has good food and wine, lots of nice people, be warned. We may be bringing mischief and mayhem to your neighbourhood very soon.
A Wine Blast on tour, it's quite a thought, isn't it? But maybe before I start printing the T-shirts, we should come back down to earth and just explain what this was. It wasn't a huge event. It was quite an intimate gathering of nice people in our hometown of Winchester, which is set amid the chalk streams and rolling hills of southern England. And the idea was just to do a light-hearted question and answer session for half an hour.
And we did actually cover a fair amount in that time, didn't we?
We
went from English wine to climate change to low alcohol and sulfite-free wines, our top tips for dinner party wines, favourite wine regions to visit, and we even got going on pretentious wine descriptions.
I plead not guilty.
You can't do that.
No, I guess you guys have to be the judge of that. Yeah, it was a fun and wide-ranging discussion on all things wine, wasn't it? It was expertly compared by our friend George Bernand. Thank you, George. And we will get stuck into all of that in just a moment. Before that, though, we wanted to mention a couple of things on another front, mainly sort of stuff that you've sent in, feedback and sort of questions.
Yeah. So,
very briefly.
So Matt C. emailed from San Jose to say, just stumbled upon your podcast this week. It's fabulous. My family has owned a 65-acre vineyard in Napa since the early 70s. Today, we sell only Cabernet Sauvignon grapes to some of the valley's top wineries. When I give tours of our vineyard, I emphasise terroir, primarily soil, climate and topography, and delve into the geology of the valley. After listening to your podcasts on minerality and geology, I'm second-guessing my presentation. My takeaway from your podcasts is that terroir matters, but maybe not as it's been traditionally defined. Maybe I should be talking about microbiomes, yeast, and UV exposure. Anyway, I hope place still matters when it comes to grape growing, and obviously there are long-term financial implications for my family if it doesn't. But I want to be honest with folks when I discuss why Napa Valley is such a special wine region. I appreciate you both, and I've just subscribed to your podcast. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Really interesting. I think if you and your family are farming for quality, you don't have anything to worry about in a commercial sense. As for the broader points you raise, terroir definitely matters. I think it's more a question of trying to understand and explain it in a more clear-eyed way than we have in the past. Maybe keeping more of an open mind as to what contributes to a wine's sense of place or sense of uniqueness. I definitely think that microbes and UV will play a part in that. So maybe we need to talk more. You need to talk more about that. Maybe, adopt a scientist to come and study your vineyard to help your presentation.
I think some of the presenters at the Masters of Wine Symposium were urging people to back research more and even, as you say, adopt a scientist, weren't they? Maybe we should all do it. Anyway, we had another email in, didn't we?
We did, yeah. This one from Professor Nick Spencer from the Department of Materials at ETH Zurich University, who's been studying mouthfeel in wine. Fascinating topic. Obviously, that's what it says, mouthfeel, how a wine feels when it's in your mouth. And he writes, I listened to your microbiology podcast, which was very interesting. I actually had a bit of an aha moment at the end, since you said something that I said in my thesis, but in a different way and contexts. Yeasts add manoproteins, which are a kind of polysaccharide to the wine. Manoproteins have been shown to enhance the smoothness of the wine, i.e. work against astringency, partially because they react with tannins, stopping them attacking the lubricating proteins in the saliva, which would lead to a drying sensation. Manoproteins also lubricate the tongue themselves to some extent, replacing the role of saliva. Different yeasts, e.g. natural ones from the grape, will produce different manoproteins during fermentation, which will influence this smoothness in different ways. Maybe, as you said, the answer to the mouthfeel problem in non-alcoholic wines is to find the perfect yeast, because they would produce the perfect manoproteins that would enhance the mouthfeel and compensate for the missing alcohol.
That is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, no, that is properly interesting. And another potential avenue for us to explore, another way in which microbes could play a role in our drinking experience. I mean, the wine world definitely needs to up its game when it comes to no and low alcohol wine too, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Anyway, we've had lots of feedback, it's fair to say, on our episodes on geology, minerality and microbes. Please keep it coming. The idea was always, wasn't it, to generate debate. We love hearing your views and we'd love to be able to feature them on the show.
Absolutely. One more piece of feedback, this time from Will G in Honolulu, who writes to say, I wanted to share with you both how much I enjoy your podcast. The information is always great and the banter between the two of you is very enjoyable. Last week I had the pleasure of listening to your Portugal's fine wine episode, and I wanted to tell you I agree with the premise. About 10 years ago, my wife and I spent a few days in Lisbon. We came across a small store doing tastings. Almost everything we tried was delicious. We are now lifelong fans of Portuguese wines. Keep making great shows. And you did actually invite us to Honolulu for a drink.
Ooh.
Which was nice.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, just to say quickly, we send best wishes to you, Will, and the whole state community out there after the recent fires. But what do you think? Drinking Honolulu?
Well, one to pencil in our world tour dates, I would say. Get it on the T-shirt. Now, by way of one final piece of feedback, a lovely message via Twitter from Omar B, best sommelier of Mexico, who said, I'm a big fan of your podcast, and it was thanks to your becoming a master of wine episodes that I decided to do it. Fingers crossed, this will be my new adventure in this beautiful world of wine. So thanks, guys.
Oh, best of luck, Omar. Thanks to you and everyone for getting in touch. We love it when you reach out, just as we hugely appreciate you giving us your precious time and company on a regular basis by tuning in, which a lot of you are doing. We've just gone past 500,000 downloads and the numbers just keep growing, don't they?
Which is great news. Yeah. And we do really try to constantly do better, don't we, to keep you informed and entertained. So, with this in mind, after this season 4 closer, we're going to be launching season 5 pretty much straight away, in the next few weeks, certainly. So keep an eye out for that. We've got some fantastic content lined up, including an exclusive interview with actor turned winemaker John Malkovich. We'll be marking the 50th anniversary of New Zealand's famous Marlborough region as well, and we'll be throwing some pretty strong opinions around in an episode on the best wine books out there, and that's just for starters.
Can't wait. Thanks to you all for your support for the subscription strategy too. We just haven't had time to put that in place for season 5, but we are definitely looking to do this with all the juicy bonus extras it will entail from the start of season 6. So again, keep an eye out for that one.
So by way of a final plug, if anyone in the UK wants some utterly delicious Hampshire sparkling wine at an unbeatable price, we have the last few bottles of our Hope and Glory fizz available from £20 a bottle. All proceeds go to charity, the Marine Conservation Society. We're going to give them a very big check soon, and we'd love to get every last bottle sold before then.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes. The reason this is topical rather than an utterly random plug is that this is the wine we were all relishing as we recorded this live Q&A. So it's very appropriate, I think. On which note, on with the show. Thanks for listening in season 4. We'll look forward to seeing you in season 5.
Hello and welcome to Wine Blast with me, Susie Barry, and my husband and fellow master of wine, Peter Richards. But we're not the only ones here for this programme, are we?
We most certainly are not. Give us a cheer, everyone.
So yes, we are here in the heart of historic Winchester in Hampshire, William the Conqueror's capital city. And we're in the Pilgrims' Hall under what is believed to be the oldest surviving hammer beam roof in the country, dating back to 1308. So we sense the weight of history on our shoulders.
But we also sense the camaraderie of wine, do we not? We're surrounded by smiling faces and people clutching glasses of fine Hampshire fizz, of which there is a lot these days.
There is indeed.
So all is well with the world. And in this episode, the idea is to just do a fun Q&A session, quite, just light-hearted, all expertly steered by our compere and local legend, George Bernand. On which note, let's go. Over to you, George.
Thank you very much, Susie and Peter. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to what is a world-exclusive event. I'm pretty sure that I've listened to most of the Wine Blast podcasts, and this is the first that is going to be recorded in front of a live audience. I think this could be the wine pit that could send these two on a UK or even world tour, and we're very lucky to have them here in the Pilgrims' Hall today. Before I move into questions from you guys, we're here in Winchester with the world-famous chalk stream, the River Itchen, flowing through it. And this chalky region is becoming more and more prevalent for the wine, with vineyards popping up all over the place. We're drinking the delicious fizz, which is made for their charity. It's called Hope and Glory, made by Hattingley Valley. So, Susie and Peter, is this current trend going to be viable and sustainable, or are these vineyards popping up as a short-term glamour project for the wealthy wannabe wine producers?
Good question. I think, the truth is you do need a lot of money to start a vineyard and a winery. There's a sort of a saying in the industry that how do you make a small fortune? Start with a large one and buy a vineyard, because it really is very capital intensive. That said, in the UK generally, not just Hampshire, there's so many people have decided that it is the right thing to do, and people with money, that it's sort of created a momentum now. And I think we're not really going to go back from that. We'll always be fairly boutique, but it's really developing quite quickly now, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can actually make money from it. You can make a business decision to make money from it.
Yeah.
There are probably better ways of doing that than others. Plant a vineyard rather than building a winery, for example, and sell the grapes is a good way to make cash. But in the grand scheme of things, it's still a tiny industry, isn't it?
It is tiny. We've got about 4,000 hectares under vine, which has quadrupled since 2000, but it's still tiny compared to Champagne is 34,000, Bordeaux is 120 or something, 110. So it's still very small, and it probably will stay small, but it is growing all the time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's growing all over. So I think, and what we are seeing is smaller people planting vineyards in, maybe their back garden, maybe over the hedge, or just doing really interesting things. And that's what, it's kind of, yes, this industry started out with your kind of gentlemen amateurs, but we're seeing all kinds of people just getting into it and fueling it. And that's really, really exciting. And I think you need that blend of different kind of entrants to make it exciting and diverse. So, if any of you out there want to
Anybody planted a vineyard?
Then what are you doing with your spare time?
Peter and Susie, before you get too overexcited about that subject, I'm going to pass you on to Philip here.
So we wouldn't get overexcited about climate change, but it is helping English wine making, as you said. Are there any other non-traditional wine-growing countries, wine-making countries we should think about?
Yeah, climate change is a toughie, isn't it? It is something that's massive, and we've all got to try and stop it, reverse it, do what we can to mitigate it as much as possible. In the meantime, yes, English wine is a very tiny sliver of a silver lining to climate change. And other regions are adapting. So I think there's two things here. Firstly is what new countries? Well, England, the UK is one of them. We did an episode recently on English wine and climate change, and we were already talking about Scottish wine and red wine becoming the norm rather than anything else. So it gives you an idea of the speed of change.
Sometimes there are limitations, though. So Scotland's problem is it's too wet, and if it's too wet, it's just too wet, and you can't. And it's unlikely that is necessarily going to change, however things warm up. So there are, and the downside of climate change, obviously, are the ridiculous weather events that you get. So in the UK, the downsides of frost events. So what will happen is the season will start warm. The buds think, great, let's start going and let's get out and bud burst. And then you get a frost. And so it really isn't all good news. But sorry, that's not really answering your question.
To answer your question, which would be the polite thing to do, Canada, Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. We're seeing some really interesting things. We had a guest on from Holland, didn't we recently? Where else? Japan. I'm not sure Japan is sort of massive.
Tasmania's really interesting. Really interesting. I went there a few years ago, and it's the most beautiful place. I don't know. Probably some of you have been to Tasmania, but that is somewhere that really will benefit from a warming climate, because a lot of Australia now is in trouble.
And so a lot of what we're seeing is elsewhere is adaptation. So, for example, in Germany, which we've always known for its white wines and Riesling, now we're getting red wines and Pinot Noir. So, and in warmer countries and regions, like you're saying, people are just having to adapt, and it's happening very, very quickly. Wine has been called the canary in the coal mine for climate change because it's so sensitive to its local environment that actually changing the weather changes the wine style, and that means people have to adapt. So we're already seeing that. A bottle of Swedish Chardonnay will be soon on your table, Philip.
Thank you very much. Moving to a more light-hearted, perhaps, Alison.
Or maybe not. So you're allowed to include descriptions that each other has possibly made, but what is the most pretentious, overflown description you've ever heard someone use to describe a wine? Don't hold back.
Pretentious? Us?
Well, it's not usually us, and Alison wasn't really meaning it necessarily us, but Pete did describe a wine many years ago in front of his friends, which is probably not the best thing to do, as blousy, didn't you? And I don't think you've ever been forgiven.
I don't know what I was thinking.
I don't know what you were thinking.
I don't even know what I meant, to be honest. I was probably just trying to sound impressive.
It's not.
Yeah, the wine world's not short of pretentiousness in general. And I think sometimes, to be serious about this for a second, sometimes it's meant as theatre. It's meant to be fun. People say, well, it's really boring to describe a wine as tasting of citrus fruits and, some very specific herbs.
That's why Gilly Goulden was so famous.
Yeah, exactly.
Became so famous for her sweaty saddles.
Sweaty saddles, that's a good one, isn't it? We did have one, there was one quote we used to use, and this is not pretentious, it's probably wrong, so I shouldn't say it, but Pinot Noir, someone describing when Pinot Noir tastes really good and it's like funky, it smells a bit like a Moroccan brothel, which we couldn't possibly endorse. But I think wine tasting as theatre is quite fun. It is, but the risk is it kind of alienates you. If you're not into that kind of thing, the risk is you think, well, I can't talk like that about wine, so I can't do wine. So there is a lot of pretentiousness in wine. I think it's coming from a good place. People are trying to be fun, they're trying to be entertaining, but actually,
if it puts you off, then that's not a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I've put everyone off with my blousy comment, but I've stopped it now. Honestly, I've stopped it. I've reformed myself.
Okay, Jenny.
Hi. Thanks for that so far. I'd be really interested to know what your views are on vintage versus multi-vintage sparklers, and also what those are.
Thank you.
Should we start with what they are? Yeah, because that's probably the easy bit. So multi or non-vintage really means the grapes came from different years. So, or several years, sorry. Vintage means they all came from just 1 year. So the reason that non-vintage or multi-vintage ever really got going, it was in Champagne, because Champagne's climate is really cold for wine growing. It's what we call as marginal climate. And so in a terrible year, what do? You can't make a great wine from a terrible year. So they would use wines from... They'd make the wines in every year, then they'd keep some back and use a mix of several vintages or years to make a wine. And it was a non-vintage wine. And that became really Champagne's main style, its calling card. And they kind of pride themselves on making then a style of wine, the same wine every year. So that becomes this sort of puzzle of putting all the vintages together. But if you've got a great year, you can make a vintage wine, which is why you get vintage Champagne as well. In England, most wines, because the industry's only been going for, in the modern sense, for 20, 30 years, most people only make vintage wines because they don't have any reserve wines. It was only when we got to 2012 when it was a terrible vintage and everybody went, we've got no wine, they realised they were going to have to put some aside rather than sell everything they made. And so since 2012, the English wine industry now has started to put wines aside, and they tend to make non or multi-vintage and vintage. And when we were talking about pretentious, I think we can describe multi-vintage as slightly pretentious, because essentially it's non-vintage, but they're saying all my vintages are so amazing that it's a multi-vintage wine as opposed to a non-vintage wine.
So Splendor, it's just a blend of different years. And actually, it's funny because wine, and it happens in fizz a lot, but it doesn't happen in normal wine. And actually you think, well, why can't it work for normal wine? And the reason, well, it can possibly make more complex, where there are some good examples of non-fizz multi-vintage blends, which are really, really good, as you imagine they might be. But every year is a new year. It's a new chance to sell a new story for wine people. So they tend to sell their new vintage, and vintage makes a story. So that's how it works. But some of the most expensive fizzes, sparkling wines in the world are multi-vintage. So Krug, famously, it's Grand Cuvée. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
It's multi-vintage. And lots of English wines. English wines often benefit from being multi-vintage.
And the difference in taste would be if you buy, say, Paul Roger non-vintage, every single time you buy a bottle, it ought to taste the same, because that's the point of being able to, the chef de cave blends it to taste exactly the same. The idea of a vintage is it will reflect the house, but also the vintage. So you will get some variation in your vintages.
But as we know, the word vintage, you can just slap another tenner on the price tag as well, can't you? So, like with clothes.
They are more expensive.
A question that I'm sure is on everyone's lips from Jim.
So, what should you always have stocked at home?
Family pack of Alka-Seltzer. Good question.
And your favourite wine?
Well, do you have any favourite stocking things at home, Jim? No. Oh, fine. You need the advice.
So I would definitely say because what we go and open is what we like best. We do have a lot of wine, as you can imagine. That's what we tend to spend our money on. But we always go for the ones that we just like the best. And so I would say always have the ones you like, because wine's about your taste, not everybody else's. But there are a few things, like definitely a really good non-vintage sparkling wine, traditional method sparkling wine, because you can sit it in a coolish place and it will just get better.
That's a really good point. Exactly.
2, 3, 4 years, it's not going to deteriorate.
So we talked about non-vintage, and non-vintage usually is the slightly cheaper style of fizz. But if you buy, people always say, well, what should I keep? Don't buy one, buy 6. You could probably get it a bit cheaper as well. But then stick the other 5 under the stairs, and they will mature and they will taste much nicer when you go back to them every time. So definitely having a stock of good traditional methods fizz, whether it's English or champagne. Buy a bit, keep it at home, keep it stocked up, and you will be able to then go back to it, and it will taste even nicer from being stocked at home. I think
in the summer it's really nice to have a bottle of Fino in the fridge. So Fino sherry in the fridge is really nice. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But if you like it, it's great to just keep in there.
That's because you're pretentious.
It might be because I'm pretentious.
I go rosé, Jim. Rosé. Rosé is year round. It's not just for summer. So,
not just for Christmas.
It's always good to get it out, and I think people actually quite like it. Some lovely rosés out there right now. But beyond that, it's what you like. House staples. If you like white, go. And if you like fresh white, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. If you like red, lighter red, nice Pinot Noir, whatever. I
think having loads of Pinot Noir, if you like red, it's hard to beat. It really is. It goes with so many things. So many people like it. It can be spectacular, and it can be really easy drinking. I hesitate to say this, but we love Chardonnay, so we're going to have a shed load of Chardonnay in our wine cellar or wherever. But, that's about what you like. If you don't like Chardonnay, you don't want that in there. But kind of versatile wines that'll go with lots of things and won't offend anybody too much.
We are Chardonnay tarts. It's official, and I'm happy to say that. Oaky, whatever you like. We love oaky Chardonnay. We love it. But well-oaked Chardonnay. It's well-oaked Chardonnay.
Not over oak, but, just a bit of oak. Yeah. No Pinot Grigio.
Favourite Chardonnay and favourite rosé. That's like asking us which our favourite child is.
So, right, I'll give you a Chardonnay.
So exactly.
We can do this.
Let me start. Where do I start?
We also have to argue, because Alison said we need to argue, okay, so I'm going to argue. Yeah, definitely. No, one Chardonnay that I think is fantastic, that is about £25, so it sort of falls in the middle, is Dog Point from New Zealand. And so I think it is oaky, but not too much. we literally could drink that every single day, couldn't we? And always open a bottle and go, love this.
We may have had a cheeky glass before we came out. What was the other? Rosé?
Rosé.
I'd go for a magnum of,
Wouldn't you just?
I would. Well, I mean, there's some lovely Provençal rosé, but it's kind of nice English Pinot rosé.
Yeah, Tuffin Hall is really delicious. Absolutely. It's 100% Pinot Noir. It's very easy drinking. It's a name that nobody will particularly have heard of unless you live right near Tuffin Hall. And it's great. And it's not too high alcohol, so you can have a lot of it.
The other one we like is Domaine of the Bee, Roussillon rosé from France.
Yeah.
And just to finish off, sorry, on Jim's question, one other thing, Jim, is bag-in boxes. They are the big new thing. Bottles are environmentally not brilliant. They're heavy. They take a lot of energy to make. So actually for staples, don't forget alternative formats. And bag-in boxes are really good. There's some fantastic bag-in box wines now, really good quality. They're much better environmentally, and you can just keep them in the fridge. And no one notices if you finish the bottle.
Bag. The Wine Society have just literally launched a range of bag-in-box.
Well, we all need to get behind it, because that's the way we're going to make wine a bit more environmentally friendly. Sorry, Josh.
No, that's brilliant. I'm going to move on to a sort of more in-depth, sort of the larger party.
I'd love to know what wines you would select for a larger dinner party of 10 or more people with a mixture of both veggies and meat eaters.
Are we invited? Because that's going to... Oh, yes. Right. Okay. Where do we start then?
Magnums.
Magnums
To start with.
Yeah, actually,
Definitely
we just
Magnums.
talked about Magnums. We talked about rosé and Magnums, but rosé, we all forget it's a hugely versatile food wine, and it goes with fish and it goes with meat. But the way to serve it is in Magnums, because suddenly it transforms what might be an ordinary drink into something that's very, very special. So Magnums or rosé have to be on your table.
I think you've got to think about, you've got a lot of guests and they've probably all got different taste, and there are certain wines that tend to be a bit Marmite, and equally you've got all the different foods. So you sort of want wines that are easy drinking. You don't want anything too kind of really big and bold and alcoholic. You don't want anything that is probably too oaky, because that isn't going to suit everybody. So, I mean, things like Grüne Veltliner is lovely from Austria, that is middle of the road, and it's not a grape that everybody drinks, but it's a really nice, or Albarino, just something a little bit different, but equally not going to scare the horses.
Could I throw two other options in there, Charlie? And that is Santorini Assyrtiko. Assyrtiko being a Greek grape variety, and it is the ultimate food wine in our view, and it goes with everything, absolutely everything you throw it at, from meat to fish to whatever.
You just said throw it at. I think you mean at it.
Yes, I do tend to do that, don't I? Yeah.
Whatever you throw your wine at
a dinner party,
you can just drink it.
It gets very exciting. And then the other one is, and this is a bit more niche, but when I was filming in Georgia recently, I had explained to me that the orange wines they make in Georgia, these ones where it's a white wine made like a red, so you keep the skins with it and it gets a bit more texture and a bit more body to it. Orange wines, the reason they developed them was because in Georgia, when you go and you have a feast, it's literally every single kind of flavour on the table. You've got spicy, you've got delicate, you've got meat, you've got fish. And the orange wines, they've made them to go with that range of cuisine. So orange wine can be a really good choice with a range of people and a range of foods.
And we haven't done red. So red, I would say often, particularly if you've got vegetarian sort of, which can be a bit sort of vegetables that are quite fruity flavoured, passamento style. So where you've slightly partially raisined your grapes. So from down in the south of Italy, they're really kind of lovely, rounded. They've almost got a touch of sweetness, but I hesitate to say that because I don't want a red wine with sweetness. But you'd be amazed; it works really well with lots of different dishes, and equally southern Italian whites as well.
Shah, would you like to ask your question, please?
Well, alcohol-free beer has moved a long way since it first emerged, and it's becoming more popular as a result. I'm yet to discover a decent alcohol-free wine. Why is that? And do you think it will ever be possible to get a good one?
That's a really good question. And we're with you. We haven't found a really great alcohol-free wine yet. And not for lack of trying. It's an area we're really, really... Because for us, it's the holy grail. If we could have something that tastes like wine, but doesn't have the alcohol, it would be lovely to have a night off with something that delicious. The problem is, you're basically in beer, you're taking out 5% of the volume, and in wine, you're taking out about 15%. And that's a big difference in terms of taste. And beer is, we forget beer is a flavoured drink. It's flavoured with hops. Wine, you've just got the fermented grape juice. So it's a double whammy, really, if you like, for wine. Beer's done a brilliant job. I don't know if you remember was it Caliber, the really, I mean, that was 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they've really invested. So now AB InBev are saying, they're fully, 25% of profits is going to come from alcohol-free stuff in the next couple of years. This is massive. Wine's just been slow on the uptake, as it generally tends to be, and it's moved very slowly. And there hasn't been the R&D. And what we need is to have kind of Chateau Margaux level grapes, and people saying this is top quality grapes. Let's try and make a really good drink out of it. We haven't seen that yet. But beers, there's some really good ones, aren't there?
Well, we definitely haven't. Unfortunately, I would love to say we've come across a really good alcohol-free wine. I think you've also got to remember, we drink to sort of feel a bit relaxed as well. So that's another area that's being researched now in sort of functional drinks that will also make you feel a bit relaxed as well. So if we could get a bit of both going, that would be really nice.
Yeah.
But the wine, they're a long way behind. Yeah.
So just a few names. If blurred vines, to our mind, the ones that work well in a wine style generally are not the wines that kind of, they're made like a traditional wine and the alcohol's just taken out. It's just not working. So the best ones are ones where people are playing around with flavourings. And Susie's mentioned functional drinks, and that's a really interesting area where people are using adaptogenics from herbs to try and sort of give you that well-being, that feeling of relaxed well-being in a sort of, wine-like, scenario. It doesn't really work for us, but then we worked out you had to actually stop drinking booze for a while before, and we can't do that. So it's an interesting field, but things like blurred vines are a really good brand for wine-like type substances. They also do some functional spirits.
And if anybody
as well.
finds one that they really like, please let us know. Yeah. We would love to.
A couple of brands, Lights from Germany do a really good job. They do a good fizz and a good Riesling, and then Sin Zero from Chile. But it's still one that needs to be worked on. I completely agree.
I've got a question that might loosely relate to this from Ingrid.
Hi there. I have a question about sulfite or sulfite-free wine. Firstly, what is it? Can you recommend any? And are they a hangover panacea or just a marketing gimmick?
So I'm just going to answer those in turn. It doesn't, no, and yes. But I think I forgot the last question, so I might have got that wrong.
I think yes was no for the last question.
What she said. So it's a really interesting question. We do get it asked a bit. There is no such thing as sulfite-free wine, unless it's been treated chemically post-production, because fermentation naturally produces sulfites. The other myth that needs busting is that sulfites cause hangovers, which is just not true. Sulfites get blamed for a lot of things, and this is sort of one area.
I think a lot of people, we've heard people say, I'm allergic to sulfites or sulfur. I think it's 1 in 100 people are actually genuinely allergic to sulfur.
Yeah, and even then it's not generally allergic. We're probably talking to a room full of doctors, so we're probably out of line here, but it's more of an intolerance. So what are sulfites? It's probably best to start there. Sulfites are natural organic compounds, usually found as sulfur dioxide. They're used as a preservative, a natural preservative, and they're incredible things. They kind of work in many different ways to basically, prevent spoilage. The thing that's quite interesting, if you think you're having problems with sulfites, is to have some dried fruit, have some pickled onions, believe it or not, have
bagged salads,
canned soup. They're in charcuterie. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere, and in far greater concentrations than in wine. If they don't affect you, it's not the sulfites. The problem generally is drinking too much, full stop. And as I can say from bitter personal experience, even so-called sulfite-free wines or no added sulfur wines or natural wines, because they're often ones which are made with minimal sulfur, they can still give you a pretty roaring hangover. So the issue is not actually sulfites. And intriguingly, what we're starting to understand, we still don't really know, is the short answer. There's a lot of medical stuff with wine we don't really understand, which is very frustrating. What we're starting to understand is actually the opposite. Sulfites tend to control the things which might really be causing you damage. And they're something called amines or amines, biogenic amines, like histamine, for example, which we all know about, which is in tree pollen and bee venom. These things can occur in certain wines. And when they're not controlled by sulfur, if you're making your wine quite naturally with minimal sulfur, you can have loads of these things. So actually, that can end up being minimal sulfur can actually end up being a wine that causes you much more of a hangover. So it's a funny one. You've got to kind of choose your wine with care. And if you have these issues which are horrible, like migraines and headaches and rashes, which a lot of people get, it's likely too low sulfur rather than too high. We blame sulfur for too many things. Is that enough of a soapbox? That felt like I felt like I've been managed to get something off my chest. Thank you very much, Ingrid. Very kind of you.
I've got one more to leave you on. Hopefully, we'll get some exciting tales.
Hi. I heard you talking about trips to Tasmania and Georgia, but could you share with us perhaps your favourite wine tour?
Favourite wine tour from each of us. Thank you. It's a lovely question. It's lovely to indulge in this sort of romantic. We were asked to do a piece for the Sunday Times recently where we had to recommend 3 each, and we literally came to blows. I'm having that one. No, you'll have. No, I'm not. So we there are so many. Have you travelled wine wise at all? Wine world? No. Well, you see, there is one thing. Hampshire, UK. Actually, now Kent, Sussex, Hampshire, Cornwall, Dorset. That you can go on a wine tour in the UK, and it's absolutely idyllic. We've got lots of hotels planting vineyards now, like the Pig in Kent.
Arundel is
Michael Caines in Devon. There's, you can do this in the UK, which is fantastic. If the weather's nice, which is you might have to imagine
but I
that.
think, what are the most gorgeous wine locations? I mean, I think Rioja is one of the most beautiful wine locations in the world. It really is just stunning, and even just saying it makes me smile because I just think of being in Rioja, and it is absolutely an incredible place to go to, I would say.
Yeah, also in Spain, sherry country. We went there for your birthday. Is underrated, and Cadiz, to go to Cadiz and the Sherry Triangle, and they go to Seville, and the eating and drinking there is outrageous. And then, it's absolutely wonderful. But I'd throw Santorini in there. I think that's the ultimate wine destination for me. And ironically, it's a wine destination which is being killed by tourism. But they want the right kind of tourists who really appreciate the wines. The wines are sensational. It's the most beautiful, most historic, the wines are sensational. So that's fantastic. Tasmania, you'd probably stick in there.
I'd stick Tasmania in, definitely.
Where else would we throw in there?
Douro Valley is amazing.
Douro Valley. South Africa is very well known. But there are some places which are really, much less well known as well. And so the wine world constantly sort of throws up these little place. I mean, Italy, Sicily, Alto Adige. You could go on and on.
People don't tend to make wine in rubbish places. So, wherever there's wine, it's probably quite nice.
Now I think about it, it's a bit like cricket as well. You don't tend to play cricket in places that are rubbish as well. That's why there's a lot of former cricketers who make wine now, which is there's a book in that, something. But no, there's a lot of wine destinations. But let's not forget what's on our doorstep too.
Peter and Susie, thank you so much for answering our questions. I'm sorry we didn't get through all of the questions, but I think it's been a huge success. It's been a fantastic evening, and hopefully we will be able to see you on many venues around the country, or maybe around the world, doing your live recorded podcasts going forward.
Thank you, George. Yeah, so everyone's glasses are empty. I think it's time for a refill. So I think we've left our audience wanting more, haven't we?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. No, that sounded like I was fishing for that, which I probably was actually. I think you just want more. I think you just want more wine, not more of our stuff. But anyway, that's fine. We'll take that. We'll
take it either way.
So thank you very much to you, our glorious audience. Thank you very much to you, George, as well. And thanks to you for listening. Until next time. Cheers. Thank you very much.